Have you heard about this?
Junk fees.
Junk fees.
Junk fees.
Biden wants to crack down on junk fees. Unnecessary, unavoidable, or surprise charges that inflate prices while adding little to no value. But of all the junk fees, there is one that is so malignant, so predatory. It's not just an inflation of an advertised price. It's a fee you can only get when you are already completely broke. It is the overdraft fee. I was 18, going to school in the city, had maybe $100 in my account, bought lunch, coffee, train ticket back home, checked my bank account that night. Turns out I started that day with a little less than I thought, and almost all of those purchases came with a $35 overdraft fee. I was hundreds of dollars below zero. And I remember thinking, whose idea was it to charge people who necessarily have no money, $35 over and over again? I assume someone whose childhood was spent vivisecting animals in the backyard, someone with a serial killer's penchant for cruelty. That's the mind it would take to conceive of the overdraft fee. Okay, so in the time before debit cards, when people wrote checks, if you wrote a check for more than you had in your checking account, it would bounce. You would be charged a fee, and if the money wasn't in your account the next day, you might even be charged that fee again. Additionally, what if the thing you were trying to pay for was rent or a car payment, and you got charged a late fee on top of the fees for bouncing the check? So as a courtesy, the bank would basically give you a very short-term loan. They don't call it a loan, there's a good reason for that. But they would let you overdraw your account by up to a few $100s, and you would pay it back out of your next deposit. This privilege was granted on a case-by-case basis by actual people at the bank. They did the overdrafts for people they knew, people they went to church with, and they decided whether to let your check bounce or let you overdraft and give you a loan, but it's not a loan. Then, in 1994, this guy, Bill Strunk, banking consultant from Texas, has this idea. It says basically, instead of doing this case by case, why don't we just make this policy? But not just that. You offer truly free checking accounts, which would peel people away from payday lenders, i.e. people with not very much money, the same people who are the most likely to overdraw their account. Strunk says with this policy, banks could make $60 a year more per customer. Now, how can it be called free checking if you get charged overdraft fees? See, a bank makes more money from people who are broke than from people who aren't. A customer who's charged one non-sufficient funds fee per month generates as much profitability for lenders as one maintaining a $12,000 average balance. They taught lenders how to order the processing of consumer transactions to maximize overdraft fees. So what they would do is they would put through bigger purchases first, so you hit zero faster. And with debit cards, which are just electronic checks, it became even easier to charge your card, overdraft, and do it even a couple times before you realize you're out of money. Now, the same reason they don't call it a loan is the same reason they're allowed to call those checking accounts free. There is something called the Truth in Lending Act, which requires full disclosure of the terms and conditions of finance charges and credit transactions. So, if you overdraft on a $5 item, i.e. they loan you $5, and you pay a $35 fee, that's an insanely high interest rate on a $5 loan. Therefore, they don't call it a loan, but rather a non-contractual courtesy. The overdraft fee is simply a handling fee, and a handling fee isn't subject to the Truth in Lending Act. And since the overdraft fee isn't in your actual fee schedule, you could still advertise free checking, and it didn't violate TILA. So Strunk and the other consultants pushing for these overdraft policies clearly crafted predatory policy. But even Strunk didn't anticipate where it was going to go.
7, 8, 9 charges in a day on a debit.
That's abusive? I agree with that.
Overdrafting made banks $34 billion a year by 2008. Now think, all of that money came from people whose checking accounts fell below zero. So in 2009, the overdraft fee is finally beginning to unravel a little bit. Suddenly, the banks had to offer the option to opt in or out. But remember, the overdraft fees are the reason for the free checking accounts. So what happens to free checking accounts? A number of banks have modified their policies on which customers qualify for free checking. The most likely reason, banks are hoping checking account fees will help offset the loss of extremely profitable overdraft fees. The banks have no incentive anymore to provide actually free checking. It was always just a way to lure people into your bank who were more likely to overdraft so you could charge them overdraft fees. And I mean, you can still get free checking, but usually it comes with some kind of stipulation like you have to maintain a $1,500 balance. Okay, so fortunately banks have taken a hit on overdraft fees, but in 2021, banks still made over $8 billion in these fees, 80% of which coming from the bottom 9% of accounts. These people are paying 10 or more overdraft fees a year. So to some extent, the jig is up. More scrutiny from Biden, and the CFPB is putting even more heat on this thing that people already despise. So you have people like Jamie Dimon saying they may be late to the show, but if it's appropriate, we're gonna make a bunch of changes. Well, overdraft fees only make a couple percent of JP Morgan's income. For others, like TD Bank, overdraft fees are a whole quarter of their income. But no bank wants to be regulated at all, and they certainly don't want to be forced to take these fees totally off the table. So vampires sustain themselves by sucking the life force from regular living humans. And the most efficient way to extract vital fluid from the most souls is actually by working at a banking trade group. And the banking trade groups love playing up the idea that the banks are providing some kind of service by letting people overdraft. The term junk fee is overly broad and ignores the needs of low-income and middle-income consumers. Consumers use overdraft protection as a safety net, protecting them from life's challenges. Biden's statements fail to recognize that some Americans rely on bank products like overdraft to pay their bills. Wow, these banks are kind of like charities or something. But obviously, the issue isn't the courtesy of letting someone overdraft. No one's trying to end that. The issue is that they charge a maddeningly high fee to people who just spent their last dollar. So where are we with this? Where's it gonna go? The White House just released a guide on what states can do to address junk fees. The CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, is on this. That's a constant project of theirs. And it's true that banks are extracting less of this money now than any time in the last 20 years. But I'll say this. In Canada, overdraft fees are capped at $5 Canadian, which is about $3.50 US, and they're only allowed once a day. But meaningful reform like that is probably not worth holding your breath over because, as was just reaffirmed by the whole Silicon Valley Bank episode, financial relief is typically reserved for the wealthy. And that will do it for me. If you found this video interesting, make sure you are subscribed to Breaking Points, of course. You can also check out my YouTube channel where I talk about media and politics and other interesting things. Link in description. Liking and sharing always helps. Please do that. Thank you to Breaking Points. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.